on YouTube. I should be live soon? I don't know. I think I'm live now. So, hello, wonderful people of the internet. Welcome back to another episode of Leos Labs. Couple quick updates before we really get into the meat and potatoes of today's vegetarian stream. Yesterday, I did a live stream. It was more or less a Writing Wednesday. These are streams where I do some amount of writing live. But yesterday I didn't actually do any writing. Instead, we were just talking about what it means to write metered poetry, right? I had to take that video down. Well, not down, it's unlisted. So if you still have the URL, you can still technically take a look at the video. But I took it down because, frankly, most of the video was me just ranting, or not ranting, but like speaking positively about my child. And as much as I'm okay with doing that kind of on Twitch off the cuff, I feel like having a standalone YouTube video out in the wild where I'm spending like 30 minutes just talking about how much I really like hanging out with my child. First of all, look, I think these discussions are fine to have, but I just didn't want that live on YouTube. It's getting very close to like docs levels, you know what I mean? Like I don't want to give information out about my family that is not, that I don't need to do. You know what I mean? I don't want this child to become like a big part of the stream, because I feel like that's, invading their privacy, you know what I mean? So let me just go ahead and recap what we did yesterday. So long story short, we talked a lot about poetry, and I think I'm going to go ahead and open up a Zernal PP shell, Zernal PP, and we can talk about what we did. So poetry, right? And this is actually relevant for today's stream as well. So keep in mind, what we're doing today is neurolinguistic programming, which is, I always do this. NLP is what we're doing. NLP. For some reason, my brain always says it's neuro-linguistic programming. But it's not neuro-linguistic programming. It's natural language processing. So anytime, if I say neuro-linguistic processing through through today's stream, just know I'm actually meaning natural language processing. I don't know why, but my brain just always says NLP means neuro-linguistic programming. I don't even think that's a real thing. Is it a real thing? It might not be, but maybe on April Fool's we'll do like a pseudoscience on neuro-linguistic programming, and that would be like our big like April Fool's Day joke or something like that. Anyway, natural language processing. What is this? It is the act of computationally discovering how it is the act of going through language and processing it in such a way that we as humans would rationally believe it to be natural, right? So if we were to say like, hello, the simplest thing that you could think of for natural language processing would be to split this up into syllables. So hello, right? Or maybe it'd be hello? Actually, where do the syllables split up in that word? I'm not entirely sure. But it's just the act of basically taking these words and parsing them up into things that just sound natural, right? Hey, Amaris, how are you? Also, I don't know if I said hey to Bagdorn as well. Okay, so let's talk about what we were talking about yesterday with poetry. So in my mind, there are a bunch of different types of poetry. There is metered poetry. There is free verse. And then there's blank verse. And I think there's other types of poetry as well. But basically, there are two things that you have to keep in mind, right? There's meter and rhyming conventions, right? Rhyming conventions, I think, are fairly typical. I think everyone understands rhyming, right? It's basically at the end of every line, you have some word, and at the end of the next line, you have a word that rhymes with the other word, right? These are used all over the place, and rhyming is particularly important because it allows for more or less a sing-songy vibe with the poem that you're reading, such that it is easier to remember, right? It's also used all the time in songs and various types of media. I think everyone knows what rhyming is. But meter is one of those things where I feel like a lot of people who have not actually read a lot of poetry or are not in poetry classes, they might not really understand what meter is, right? You might know that Shakespeare, for example, is in iambic pentameter, or pentameter, but you might not know what that means, right? And I think we'll do a quick overview of what that means, and then we'll hop into what I want to do today. I'm just about waking up. That's totally fair. I think a lot of people in the US are also just waking up right about now. Man, I wish one of these days we're going to get sleep at night. Whenever my kids start sleeping through the night, I'm going to be so happy. But that has not happened yet. Last night, I was actually up until 1 a.m. Reading about poetry and reading about meter and reading about NLP and all this kind of stuff. And I actually have a really interesting thing I want to talk about today. Emrys, I didn't know you were in France. I was saying that you were not alone in waking up at this time. The two options I had to respond to that was, oh, hey, other people are waking up. Or I could have said like, oh, rough night or something like this, like, so I opted for the, hey, everyone else is waking up. 4 a.m. writing. What are you writing? Is it a full novel? Because I know you said it's like writing month, which, okay, there's some controversy here. There used to be this project. There is a project known as NaNoWriMo, National Novel Writers Month. It is a way to encourage people to write an entire novel in the month of November. There's been some controversy around NaNoWriMo, so I don't want to talk about it, but I'm not technically taking part in it. But it is a really good initiative, and I really like to encourage people to do writing and creative expression in as many ways as they can. I'm translating a fan fiction. Oh, that sounds fun. Okay, you don't have to tell me, but what is it on? Like, what is the fan fiction of? 1 a.m. is still a rookie number for me. So I am a person that has always, historically, in my life, gone to bed early and woken up early. For me, going to bed at 9 and waking up at 5 is about typical. However, in the PhD, I would typically do 7 to 3 instead. Just because in my mind, there's basically nothing good that happens after 7 p.m. Like, my brain isn't working because I spent the entire day, working, doing something for my PhD, doing a lot of computational work, doing something, right? And so after 6 p.m., really and truly, my brain, it just doesn't work. It's just mush. And so any of the work that I get done from like 7 to 9 or like 7 to midnight, it's basically useless work for me. It's not worthwhile, right? However, when I get up early at 3 in the morning, I find that I'm incredibly productive. I can get a lot of work done. That's why my streams used to be from 5 to 7 in the morning, because I just get up at 4:30, I start streaming. I feel very energized. That time when I just wake up is usually the moment that I'm the most energized during the day. But the nights and the parties, I guess, I don't know. I'm not really a party guy. Like, if you'd believe it, as someone who's randomly streaming research on Twitch, I'm not much into that atmosphere. I'm not into that type of thing. As a Harry Potter fan fiction that rewrites the original, that's interesting. I feel like a lot of people fell out of love for Harry Potter after they realized who J.K. Rowling was as a person. You know what I mean? Like, I don't have the right way to describe what I'm trying to say, but I think a lot of people kind of, they stopped thinking about Harry Potter in the past few years. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it still has a huge following and I don't know about it. You know what I mean? Okay, so let's keep talking about poetry. So one thing that we did yesterday is we pulled up this book that I'm writing, okay? So let me go ahead and pull it up for you guys right now, opening up a giant terminal because people said my text was too small. And we're going to open up that poem right now. Now, as I'm opening up this poem, please, let me be very clear about this. The directory name is not indicative of the title of the book, so don't read into it too much. So then we're going to do CD source, and we're going to CD in content, and we're going to do vi1.md. Okay, so I know very few people who manage both studies and social life well. I think that's fair. I think like a lot of people who are in STEM fields, they tend to, how do I put this? There is a particular joy I get from research that I can't find anywhere else. And when I'm outside of doing research, I find myself constantly wanting to do more research and talk about research, right? It's why sometimes when I am like reading or just doing something else, like maybe playing a video game or just hanging out with friends, it's very difficult for me to do that because I want to be talking about research. I want to be talking about new things and stuff I haven't heard of before, or doing things people haven't done before, like all of this, you know what I mean? And then to kind of take a step back from that and to talk to people in the real world is quite hard sometimes, Basically, James Potter has a Russian half-sister, and she is the one who becomes his guardian. Oh, interesting. Hey, a silent tree, how are you? Solving math and algorithm project problems give me that feeling, right? Henef, hey, how are you? So, yesterday, we talked a bit about poetry, right? When we were talking about poetry, I basically started annotating the story that I was writing and trying to figure out why the meter felt so off, right? Now, meter, I didn't really do a good job describing it before, is basically a way in order to analyze the flow of a poem, right? So when people say a poem is written in iambic pentameter, what that means is that we have iambs, which is a particular type of a metrical foot, and we have 5 of them. So pentameter, 5 of these metrical feet, right? So in iambic pentameter, or in iambic pentameter, I actually don't know if it's pentameter or pentameter. For some reason, I switch between the two of them. It's essentially a light, unstressed variable, or unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. So let's just go over here and go iambic pentameter. All right. What up, Dagmarski? How are you? So let's go here. So it goes da-dum, 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 right? And so when I do count the clock that tells the time to swell the gourd and plump the hazel shells, right? This is just a random thing that was put on Wikipedia, right? And this thing above it, like the X and dash and the X and the dash, is something called a scansion. And I did that with my poem as well. Now for me, when I'm speaking, and this is something I don't fully understand, when I'm speaking, I feel like I don't speak in iambs, right? I don't speak with just a da-dum, 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 da-dum. For some reason, when I speak, I feel like it's more common to use what are called trisyllabic feet, right? Instead of doing just 2 beats per foot, I like doing 3 beats per foot. So let me just read the first line here. So once I was out and about at midday, right? So you can actually, you can move your hands to it. So like it will go da 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 da. So once I was out and about at midday, right? And I found that by adding in the scansion, adding in the where the stressed syllables are and where the unstressed syllables are, it actually makes it much, much easier to read, just as anybody, right? And so when I was thinking about how to make this book kind of more approachable for people who are not used to metered poetry, I decided, hey, one easy way to do this is just to add the scansion in. So as people are reading, they see what it's supposed to read like, right? And then I realized something. I realized that for me, the book really flows very well if every single metrical foot is something called a dactyl, right? A dactyl is a trisyllabic foot, which is, again, what I showed before. It's a hard downbeat followed by 2 soft beats, right? So it's da 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 da, right? And it flows really well in this way, specifically if I take the end of every line and I flow that back over to the next line. So again, the first 2 lines is, once I was out and about at midday, absolutely normal in every way, right? And as long as you continually flow that dactyl meter into the next line, it ends up actually flowing really, really nice. And I really like the feeling of this new paragraph that I've written after rewriting the first stanza here. And I think I'm going to keep going with that for the rest of the book, right? And so this is where we start talking about what I actually want to do today, right? This ability to write down the scansion is something I can do manually, right? Definitely can do manually. But, I kind of, I in my heart, I feel like I'm not just, I don't just write poetry, right? Like I do more research than I do poetry. And the automatic analyzation of poems is something that has always been interesting to me, right? As when I was an undergraduate, I learned about natural language processing, and at the time, machine learning wasn't super big. So there were some simple AI algorithms out there, but mostly it was just heuristics, and it was really interesting, right? Then as I started going through the PhD, I kind of kept up on natural language processing, but it doesn't really, how do I put this? The problem is that everyone's doing ML, right? And ML just kind of sucks for this particular process. And I don't think ChatGPT can do it. You could ask it to, and maybe I'm completely wrong about this. But the reason I don't think ChatGPT can write this book is because I don't think there is another book out there that uses doublet rhymes with a dactyl meter. I actually don't think it's theoretically possible to do so. And I want to talk about why. Because even this, I'm using a trisyllabic foot, but though I like the dactyl meter and it wraps itself around to the next line, you would not call this a dactylic. You would not call this dactylic tetrameter. And the reason is that even though these are dactyls, these here are antidactyls. And I'll use, there's the dactyl, antidactyl, and then there's the one where the foot is in the middle here. So da-dum, da-da-dum, da-dum, right? And so the point is that ChatGPT has to learn from other people who have written in this way, but there's so little writing that is in a trisyllabic form specifically for poetry that I don't know if it's basically what I was reading yesterday is that there aren't really good ML models for determining the metrical foot of a poem if that poem is not iambic or trochaic, right? Trochaic is the opposite of an iamb. Instead of going da-dum, 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 it goes dum-da, wait, da-dum, 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 you know? So let's see. Not many people speak in iambs. Yeah, I agree with that. So what you're researching, yeah, this is exactly what I want to do. I want to look into metrical foot analysis and learn more about this. Explain dactyls. Yeah, I'll do that in a second. There are probably books like this, but not common. I could not find a single one. So I'm going to posit something. I'm going to say something that it may be not true, but I'm just going to write it down. I don't think it is possible to have dactylic meter with rhyming. I don't think that's possible. I strictly do not think that's possible. So what do I mean by that? Let's actually go, instead of talking about dactylic poetry, let's go up with another example with a very famous anti-dactylic poem. So let me just write this out. So we have iambs, we have trochees, we have dactyls. These are also sometimes called cretins, and then we have antidactyls, which are also sometimes called anapests, right? So an iamb is an iamb is a light beat followed by stressed beat. A trochee is a stressed beat followed by light beat. A dactyl is a stressed followed by 2 light beats, and an antidactyl is a series of 2 unstressed beats followed by a stressed beat. There's also another one, which I don't remember the name of, which is unstressed, stressed, and then unstressed. And obviously you could read your poem in such a way that it's all just iambs and trochees, because, like, you know, you don't really need, like, depending on how you want to dissect the poem, right, you could write it in such a way that, like, you only use 2 elements instead of using 3 element feet. But I'm kind of getting ahead of myself. Symmetrical foot, is this a weird mix of imperial and SI? Could be. So let me give you a poem, an antidactyl poem that I think everybody knows. So we're going to go into, what's it called? The night before Christmas. Okay. So the night before Christmas. This is a very famous poem that is known for being antidactyl. It's known for being anapestic, I guess is a word. So 'twas the night before Christmas. And let me see if I can just grab like a screenshot of some of the writing, and we can put in the scansion on top of it to explain how it reads, right? 'Twas the night before Christmas, a full poem. Let me remove that certificate error and remove that certificate error and zoom in. Nope. I just too many ads, man. All right, let's not go to this page. Let's go to another page. How about this one? I should open this up in Firefox where I do not have any ads. Okay, here's a good one. We will just grab maybe some of these lines, and let's just put the scansion in. So we're going to grab this here and go down to that line right there. That seems pretty good. Go over here and open it up in Journal PP. Journal, new page before, here. And let's go to my pictures, down to the bottom of the screenshots, and grab this bad boy. Okay, so let's put the scansion in here. I tried using ChatGPT for a poem. Soft wool and sunlight, dancing on green, trochaic rhythms, tender and clean, dactylic laughter. You're right, it does seem pretty good. Dactylic laughter, bounding they play, springtime in meadow, they then drift away. The shorter place still uses trochaic and dactylic rhythms to capture the iamb's lively spirit and gentle calm. Okay, it kind of broke at the end there, but this is not bad, actually. Soft wool and sunlight. So, soft wool and sunlight, dancing on green. It's not quite right. Let me see, but so it's not quite dactylic, actually. Let me go ahead and let me just copy the link here, and we can just take a look at this one too. Let's analyze that poem. Yeah, let's just take a look at this poem and analyze it. Let me grab this guy. Let's see, I might be wrong. Yeah, maybe I'm wrong. So journal, new page before, and let's just paste this bad boy in. Nope, that's not what I wanted. I need to grab it from here again. Image pictures, screenshot. This is the one I grabbed. It's not iamb. It's, wait. It's not, Wait. Could you explain what you mean here? It's not I am. It's. Oh, did someone use an L instead of an I? I'm doing okay, Meek. How are you doing? Okay, so let's just take a look at The Night Before Christmas. 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. Okay, so this one is known for being anapestic. So let's just go ahead and annotate it. I'll do it in blue. So 'twas. Okay, that didn't quite work, did it? Why didn't it work? Why can't I write on this? Oh, I can. Okay. So 'twas the night before Christmas when all through the house. I did something wrong. 'Twas the night before Christmas when all... that was it. All is supposed to be. When all through the house, not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that Saint Nicholas soon would be there. Okay, so let's talk about this really quick. So I put some very basic scansion on here. So again, you're expecting 3 syllables per foot. So 'twas the night before Christmas when all through the house. Not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. Now here's where this clearly was anapestic, right? Because every single foot we have two unstressed syllables with a stressed syllable, right? So these up here to this point is clearly anapestic. But once we get past the second line, right? So I'm drawing the feet right here. Then the anapests break apart, and we have, where does the foot end and start here? It's not very clear. You could say this is a pickup note, and then we have dactyls, or you could say this is the end of an anapest, and so it should end here if we're going to be doing anapestic meter, and then it ends with this, and another pickup note, or like a half anapest, or what would we call an iamb here, and an iamb here, to go into another anapestic writing. You see what I'm saying? But the point here is that, like, it's not purely anapestic, is what I'm trying to say. Most people, when they're writing poetry in a way with trisyllabic feet in English, they break the meter in order to fit the poem a little bit better, right? And that's okay, like, because most people wouldn't notice, right? 'Twas the night before Christmas when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. As you're reading it, you kind of just ignore the fact that there's actually a beat missing here. There's a missing beat here, and there's a missing beat here. And you just ignore it. It's fine, because it's an unstressed syllable anyway, so it's not so big of a deal. But it's very unusual to have a poem with trisyllabic feet that is actually truly trisyllabic the entire way. I'll take a look at this one as well. So let's copy the link. Go over here. Can I just grab this image and copy it? Copy image. Journal, new page before, and let's paste it in here. Okay, so I actually want to take a look at these guys and see what they say. So let's go to the up here. So deep in the void. So deep in the void of the cosmos expanding. That's not so bad. So deep in the void of the cosmos expanding, right? Quantum computers are silently. No. So quantum computers, so Q here. Computers are silently standing, right? Processing data from worlds far away, right? Processing data from worlds far away, this is actually quite hard. Far away. Seeking the signs of a new DNA. I think that's how it is. I might be missing this a bit. So deep in the void of the cosmos expanding. Deep in the void of the cosmos expanding. Quantum computers are silently standing. Processing data from worlds far away. seeking the signs of a new DNA. Okay, so to be fair, this is pretty good. I'm actually surprised. I didn't think that ChatGPT could actually could do trisyllabic feet this well, which is a little bit annoying to me, but it's okay. Suddenly circuits are sparking with life. Digital beings spring forth without strife. It was Claude. That's fair. I actually don't know the difference between Claude and ChatGPT, and I don't really have any interest in learning. Trotting through green hills, soft little lambs leap. Okay, so this doesn't work. Trotting through green hills, soft little lambs leap. Trotting through green hills, soft little Trotting through green hills. So it must be this. Trotting through green hills. Soft. Oh, I see. This is a soft little lambs leap. Trochaic beats land. Gentle and deep. Is that right? Trotting through green hills, soft little lambs leap. Ooh, that's really tough, isn't it? Trotting through green hills. Am I missing something? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It is 5 per. So this is a long version, but it also asked a shorter version. Yeah, the longer version might read a little bit better. Let me take a look at that one. Copy link. Because I remember the one you just sent in chat was actually pretty good. Here. Soft wool and sunlight, dancing on green, trochaic rhythms, tender and clean. This is actually pretty good. This one's not bad. Let me go ahead and copy this image. Yeah, this one reads a lot better. Journal, new page before, paste here. Soft wool and sunlight. Swap lambs and leap. Down here for this one? But leap needs to rhyme with deep. Let me just go back up here. So this one actually read pretty well. So soft wools and sunlight. So soft wool and sunlight. And sunlight. So soft wool. How does this one go? Soft wool, and it must be this way then. Oops. So soft wool and sunlight, dancing on green, trochaic, it must be this one, trochaic rhythms, tender and clean. Okay, I think that's right. It's not bad. So it's soft wool and sunlight, dancing on green, trochaic rhythms, tender and clean. It's not so bad. ChatGPT struggles a lot when it's longer. So the truth is, look, it's probably fine, right? I'm actually impressed. I didn't think that there was enough literature out there in order to write poetry that has trisyllabic feet for like the LLM models to actually pull from. You know what I mean? I actually didn't know. Like, so the thing about poetry is like, I don't know if it's easier or harder for ChatGPT to write poetry or prose. I'm not entirely sure which is, like, would it be easier? Because poetry is heavily, like, there's like, it's easier for ChatGPT to, like, figure out exactly, like, if you say, I want iambic poetry, right? It can specifically single out poems that are iambic and then go from there, you know? So I feel like it should be easier. There's also a lot of heuristics, I feel, to write poetry in this form, right? And so in a sense, I guess I could imagine ChatGPT being particularly good at this type of writing. In another sense, I don't know how easy it is because how do I put this? There's way more prose than there is poetry, I think is what I want to say. So anyway, my point is that, like, I don't think it's possible, strictly possible, to have a poem that is entirely dactylic and also has rhyming. And I think this kind of shows that right here. So this is even ChatGPT. So sure, this is not a human. There could be a way to do this. Expanding here, right? So this is a dactyl. This is a dactyl. This is a dactyl. This is not. right? And this one also ends with a non-dactyl. And this one is, like they didn't even try with this one. So dactyl, dactyl, and then this one, not dactyl, not dactyl. And then here, like, I actually don't know how to read this one. So this is a dactyl, but at some point the foot changes to an anapest for this last one. You know what I'm trying to say? But maybe I messed up on DNA, far away, DNA. Maybe I messed up when I was scansioning this one. So it could be far away. So this one's actually also an anapest at the end. But I think my point remains that it's this one, away. Yeah, that's right. And so it actually ends in an anapest. Oh, I don't know how that one ends actually, but it doesn't really matter. So I think this like discussion about, like, how do I put this? The discussion of metrical feet is important, right? But is important from a like poet's perspective. Like people who are writing poetry care about this because it's a way to like analyze their poem to ensure that the poem reads cleanly, right? But it doesn't have to be that way, right? What I'm trying to say is, by mixing your metrical feet and only really caring about the stresses on every line, you can still write a pretty dang good poem that is probably also even easier to read without necessarily relying on strict metrical feet. You know what I'm trying to say? And I did and do still believe this to be true. When I wrote my poem before, I had written it in such a way. It was specifically tetrameter, so there were four stressed syllables per line. But it was written so that the feet could be mixed up, right? Because I feel like messing around with your metrical feet allow for more emotional beats that you would not ordinarily get if you were not to allow yourself to do so, right? So let me keep going down here really quick. One thing that I noticed as I was looking at 'Twas the Night Before Christmas and all through the house is that actually as it gets further and further down, like the author, I don't remember the author's name, but the author here, the poet, whatever, they actually do spend a lot of time or they make sure that the poetry is always using metrical feet with 3 syllables, right? This is consistent throughout. But I don't know if you can consistently call it anapestic, you know? But I think that's okay, because I think this idea of a metrical foot, at least in English, does kind of break down when you go to trisyllabic feet. And I think as long as you're just trying to maintain trisyllabic feet throughout the poem, it can be considered to be anapestic or dactylic. You don't have to worry too much about, you know, the exact beat that the stressed syllable like falls onto. So looking at the poem that I was looking at, or I was writing the other day, or I'm still writing, it goes like, you know, the whole paragraph I think reads pretty cleanly when you allow for the dactyl to finish out on the next line. So, once I was out and about at midday, absolutely normal in every way, but across the small alleyway there was a niggle, a tendril, an arm thing, a little black wriggle. I cannot describe it except that I blinked. After that it had vanished, it just went extinct. So I sat there and thought, and I thought, and I thought, all while hoping to find some great mystery I sought, but it never came back. Well, at least not from me. While in bed I did think about what it could be. You know, that's the whole, like, that's the thing. You know, I did it quite quickly, so like probably you couldn't also like understand like what the story was. I probably should have read it a little bit slower, but like it flows just so much smoother, you know, after adding in or ensuring that the metrical foot was consistently dactylic throughout, right? Way better than what it was before. Although before I still think it was pretty good. I think now it's like way better. You know, before yesterday I was not convinced that we needed to stick to a strict meter. But now I'm absolutely convinced that this is a good idea. So with that said, I started looking. I want to find a way to do 2 things. One, I want to make sure that I can consistently provide the scansion, this like, you know, stressed, unstressed notation in the actual book that I'm writing, right? And that's not necessarily easy to do. So let me describe what that means. So first of all, journal, new page before. There's a couple things I want to do. One, provide scansion to readers, right? So this means that I need to find some way to maybe do some sort of TIC-Z LaTeX thing. I don't know what this means. That will basically read in the poem and then figure out where the scansion should appear on the top of every line. Now, this could be done in a bunch of different ways, and I can talk about that in step number 2. So we need TIC-Z, and then we need some way to turn that into HTML, and then we need some way to host that online, and then we need some way to turn it into a book. Okay, so this is actually going to take a little bit of time because I need to find the right like LaTeX format so that I can write the poem to begin with numbered lines and all that kind of stuff. That's one thing. Then I need to figure out how to write the ticks code so that it will actually put the appropriate like dots and lines above the appropriate characters. I don't think that's too bad because I can just kind of count up like the kerning distance between each letter. So it should be relatively like extensible depending on what font people want to use. It should be totally fine. To turn it into HTML, again, this isn't so bad. I can just use PDF LaTeX, so HT LaTeX, which is a command that allows me to turn basically any LaTeX into HTML, and that should be okay. I'm hosting that online. This is a little bit hard because I'm using documenter.jl right now, but surely there's a way to put this to make this work. Have you thought about trying Typist? I have not. Let me take a look at that in just a second. So documenter.jl, the problem is that I need to read in raw HTML, which is kind of a pain. And then turning that into a book comes naturally if it's all in LaTeX. Okay, so I'm going to take a look at Typist because maybe that's the solution to everything. What is this? Writing trainer designed exclusively for professional services. What is Typist? H. Without the... Oh, I see. And maybe I'll do this on Google. Okay, compose papers faster. So what is this? This is going to be written in... oh, this is not LaTeX. This is its own special thing, right? So what is the advantage of using something that's not LaTeX? I guess I'm going to ask, because I feel like I know LaTeX so well, it would be kind of a little bit weird. Like, does Typist have a like a ticks thing? Like how do you draw things in Typist, I guess? People who know, tell me. I feel like LaTeX should be easier to work with. Yeah, it's its own thing. Yeah, that's actually kind of cool. It's good because a lot of people get really confused with LaTeX. So I think this is actually the way to go. Hugo, I think, is a good CMS. Chris Titus used it. So Hugo is another thing. I think I've used it before even. The world's fastest framework for building websites is just... all I need to do is display HTML with a sidebar, right? And I feel like it's totally fine to like have the sidebar be like documenter.jl sidebar. So this is what it looks like right now. So laoslabs.com/scribble-laos. So this is kind of what it looks like right now. So it's just you go here and you have a poem that you want to read, right? It's not necessarily like, I don't know, it could be fancier, but it doesn't have to be too much fancier. Like, the whole reason for this to exist is just so people can go online and they can read it, right? Yeah. But, sorry, sorry, I said I was a little bit sick earlier. I'm still a little bit sick. I think there's some compatibility with ticks, although it can probably be a pain. I mean, the other option is just to directly write some SVG or something like that. I don't know. So basically what I'm saying is this bit is going to take me some time to figure out. I don't necessarily think it's going to be impossible. I think it's just going to take me like a week of just hacking around with LaTeX and stuff like that to figure out. So the other question is, how do we users interface with this typesetting? Language, I guess it's a language. I don't really know. So the easiest thing is just to do the following, right? We take a line and we say something like HE, and then we do dot, and then we do LLO, and we do dash, right? And basically what this would do is it would say that we are taking in some sort of text that the user has written, and we have some special notation. Here it's just going to be like these curly braces. I don't really know what the best notation is. And we parse it out so that we know that this dot goes above the HE, right? So dot goes right above the HE, and the dash goes right above the LLO, right? And in fact, I'm not entirely sure if the LL should be here or not. I don't know where it should be, or should it be this? Hello? I don't know. That's one thing we could do. That's the easiest thing for us to do. Like it's literally just, well, I guess the easiest thing for us to do would just be not to do anything at all, right? So 0, don't do anything, right? And going back to the poem, maybe that is fine, right? Because if your poem has a very strong meter, in principle, you shouldn't have to write anything, right? Like imagine we didn't have these lines on here. So let's do this, write this here, and let's just delete these lines. So I delete this, and I'm going to read it now. So once I was out and about at midday, absolutely normal in every way, but across the small alleyway there was a niggle, a tendril, an arm thing, a small... Yeah, see, I'm actually like failing a little bit here, and like I know how it's supposed to be read, you know, but maybe that's because I know how it's supposed to be read, I'm struggling with it. So once I was out and about at midday, absolutely normal in every way, but across a small alleyway there was a niggle, a tendril, an arm thing, a little black wriggle. I cannot describe it except that I blinked. After that it had vanished, it just went extinct. So I sat there and thought, and I thought, and I thought, all while hoping to find some great mystery I sought, but it never came back. Well, at least not for me. While in bed I did think about what it could be. It's not so bad, right? Like I think people could generally read this and they wouldn't need the scansion on top, right? I think that is probably a valid thing to say. But with the scansion, I think it's much easier to read, right? I think. Maybe I'm just like, you know, talking about stuff I don't understand. By the way, 0N Belfa 0, thank you so much for following a few minutes ago. The thing is, typists can do templates way easier than LaTeX with way fewer explicit imported packages and also way faster compiling. That could be a reason to look into typists, actually. If it is much better at doing templates, I mean, we specifically need a poetry template. Maybe this is what we want. Okay. So let's talk about other things that we could do. Another thing that we could do is we could have it so in the start of every line, we have like the dots and dashes. So for example, we could do this, and then we put in something like hello, right? And then we have some other software to come in and say, oh, by the way, there's a syllable here, right? And so in front of the first syllable, we put a dot. In front of the second syllable, we put a dash or something, right? That's something else we could do. The third way would be just to literally put this into some other software that can already detect where the feet are. And then once it figures out where the feet are, we can just write hello. And it naturally just aligns the feet to where it's supposed to go, right? For this particular poem, it shouldn't be so hard because I'm intending to keep a very strong dactylic rhythm throughout. The problem is like something like this, right? Absolutely has 5 syllables, but you could pronounce it in a bunch of different ways. Absolutely with 4 syllables, right? But for this particular poem to read nicely, most people would naturally say absolutely normal, right? And so it's like you add an additional syllable to a word that does not normally have it. Or there's something down here where we remove a syllable, like mystery, right? I remove a syllable down there just so it fits the meter a bit better, right? So I don't know. It's one of those things where there are kind of like 100 different ways we could go about this. And I just wanted to spend a little bit of time looking at where the state of the art is currently in natural language processing to figure out what we could actually do. Maybe at the end of the day, it's not strictly necessary to have the scansion on there. I just think it's really useful for new people who are reading poetry, right? Because there's 2 things that I'm doing here that make it easier for people who are not used to reading metered poetry to read this book. The first is that I want to add in that scansion so people can read it and they don't have to think about where the stresses are. They can just read it and it should flow naturally, right? Because even a lot of famous poems, if they're trying for this trisyllabic, meter, these trisyllabic feet, they don't read naturally all the time, right? And so I want to make sure it reads as naturally as possible. The other thing is that I try to make it so that the feet end on the next line, right? And so we have dot, and then it goes to absolutely here. What this does is it allows for a flow from line to line. So let's go back to like the night before Christmas. 'Twas the night before Christmas. 'Twas the night before Christmas when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. Those flow really well. And the reason they flow so well is because an anapest naturally ends at the end of the line over here, right? So because the anapest naturally ends and it has a very strong beat at the end of every line, it's much easier to rhyme with another word that has a single syllable, right? But as we start going down, there are certain situations where it doesn't quite work out. So for example, when out on the lawn there rose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. So here, where is my, there it is. Because this is this particular rhyme stresses clat and then here, it messes up the ending anapest. So when out on the I already messed up. When out on the lawn there rose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter, right? And so you'll note that this one still reads particularly well because this this here, extra pickup note or whatever, can be read with the anapest in here, right? And so this flows particularly well. But there are some that don't quite flow so well. Maybe up here in Reindeer, for example, maybe don't flow as well, right? My point is that even in like very famous poems that are using these trisyllabic feet, it's quite difficult to have the poem continue on to the next, continue and flow onto the next line. And I think this is very important for new readers because that way it reads more like prose and you don't have to think so much about, like, the meter is there, it's important that it's there, but it also should fall into the background so you don't have to think about it too much, is the hope, right? Okay, so that is a relatively long, like 50-minute spiel about all the stuff that we were talking about yesterday. It's almost as long as the stream we did yesterday, to be honest, and in a sense, even more in depth. So yeah, I do want to take just a few minutes here to look into Typist and see if there's a way to do HTML to Typist. HTML, output Typist. How is it? Yeah, that's it. Output HTML, issue number 114. Add support for outputting as HTML, both from CLI and lib. It looks like this is still open. Is it still open? Closing this in favor of 721. HTML export. This is all very much a draft notes currently, but it will be worked upon in the coming days. So take everything with a grain of salt. So this was done in 2023. It's still open. And it looks like we don't have HTML output exactly just yet. The other thing I need is TXZ and Typist. I'm willing to learn something new. Let me just go here. And is it setZ? Is that what it is? Yeah, this looks great. So it looks like we can do pretty much anything that we want to do in LaTeX. It's just the HTML output that we don't have. I need to think about whether that's necessary. For today's stream, it doesn't really matter too much. I don't think I'm actually going to be focusing on writing like the LaTeX output or anything like that. But it is something that I think I could look into in the near future. Now, I do want to quickly mention the ChatGPT stuff because, okay, here's the truth. I have always been of the opinion that ChatGPT writes basically inferior everything, right? Because the only thing I've seen from ChatGPT is kind of garbage, right? Like in terms of academic writing, it is not great. In terms of prose, it is not great. But I will say the following. These poems are actually not bad. You know, like actually much better than a lot of poetry I've been reading recently. And this is why I'm actually kind of surprised. I was not expecting ChatGPT to be able to write poems with in this way. Like I'm still very impressed about that. That is, I was thinking in my mind that there was no way that ChatGPT could do this. Like I really was like, because of how bad the prose is and how bad the academic writing is when you're using ChatGPT and these AI models, I really, really genuinely thought there was no way it could do poetry well. I didn't even come across or didn't even think about that. Look, I'm in no way ever going to be using ChatGPT for any work that will be published in any way, shape, or form because it's strictly illegal, and I have no intention of doing that. But, you know, it's not so bad. Suddenly circuits are sparking with life. Digital beings spring forth without strife. Like, this one's weird. Like, this line sucks, right? But it's not so bad. Like, for the most part, it's not bad, right? Reaching through space to communicate home, back to Earth where their makers still roam. Like, it's not bad. Like, yeah, this one sucks, and this one's meh. Humans and programs now merge into one, dancing through stars like rays of the sun. Evolution has found a new way to proceed. Silicon consciousness, strange human seed. It's okay. Like I would put this in. I would say this like 80% there, even 90% there. When compared to a lot of poems that I've seen recently, most people don't have good rhyme and meter. You know, the theming in the poem is quite stereotypical. To be fair. The theming of the poem. What do you mean theming of the poem? Of course, the most annoying thing is the math.ml output. What is math.ml? Is this the same as like MathJax? GPTs are great at predicting patterns like rhythm, etc. As for substance, it's a bit lacking. So for the record, it is, again, it's not great, right? So the first line here, deep in the void of the cosmos expanding, quantum computers are silently standing, processing data from worlds far away, seeking the signs of a new DNA. Okay, I'll be honest here, right? If this was a human author, I would tell them the following. I would say, deep in the void of the cosmos expanding, quantum computers are silently standing, right? What does this mean? You know, and what does this mean? You know, like what are you trying to tell me? Like what is this actually like doing? Right? This is what I would say. I'd be like, I don't understand what this poem is trying to say, but a poet, you know, doesn't necessarily have to be as like, I don't know how to say it, because the poetry is meant to be evocative in its own right. It's okay kind of if the poem doesn't necessarily have like a very clear meaning. You know what I mean? I try to make sure that when I'm writing, each line makes a lot of sense and is very clear as to what I'm trying to say. But here it's like, there's just weird things here, like new DNA? What do you mean new DNA? Seeking the signs of a new DNA. So what we're talking about here is, to be fair, it could just be the prompt, right? Could be the prompt. But I'm like, okay, I don't know. This is a little bit weird. And then here, suddenly circuits are sparking with life. Digital beings spring forth without strife. Like this line, this is just weird sounding. Right here. This is weird, right? Yeah, I don't know what the prompt was. I should have looked at the prompt. I had the prompt available. Anyway, down here, this one's actually pretty good because if your little lambs, here, soft wool and sunlight dancing on green, trochaic rhythms tender and clean, dactylic laughter, bounding they play, springtime in meadow, then drift far away, then drift away. Hey, this shorter piece still uses trochaic and dactylic rhythms to capture the lamb's lively spirit and gentle calm. Yeah, look, it's fine. This is totally fine. Like, I would argue that you could even use this as a way to teach. Well, it's not actually that great because again, like here we have a dactyl followed by a trochee, and then this actually is not dactylic. So this one is dancing on green. So this one's actually a trochee followed by a iamb, and then we have a dactyl and then another trochee. Point is, if this was a tetrameter, it would be a lot better, so that you could you could use this to explain what specifically dactylic and antidactylic meter is. But for the most part, it's not so bad. Like, it really is not so bad. Tender and, look, that's definitely a dactyl. It's just the fact that you only have a clean here. It means that it ends up reading as a trochee followed by a iamb, right? You know what I'm trying to say? Like, it's really, really not so bad, you know? And I recognize that, you know, you're right. I mean, large language models are great at predicting patterns and stuff like that. It's a little bit frustrating for me because as someone who really enjoys reading and even writing poetry, like, I found that there's just like a really, like, there's just a lack of, like, good poems written in, how do I put this? Good poems, good novels in verse is what I'm talking about, right? That's what I'm looking for. What are you doing? I am doing, do I know you in person, Michael? I don't, I might, but I know a couple Michaels, but the last name is evading me right now, and I feel like I would have recognized that last name. So right now I'm doing some natural language processing, and we're talking about poems and stuff like that, and I want to look into the state of the art of studying metrical feet in poetry and see where it's at. There's also fine-tuning. I got superb results as little as 30 examples fed into OpenAI. There's also fine-tuning. I got superb results with as little as... So results in terms of what? What were you doing to get those results, right? Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that, like, in general, when I talk about ChatGPT and we talk about machine learning and stuff like that, I've yet to see anything... I've yet to see anything from a ChatGPT or ML output that actually looks like promising, you know, but this poetry is not so bad. It's much better than a lot of human authors, you know. I'm from Austria, but what I see, I find mesmerizing. Cool. I'm happy you're here. So let's see. Man, I gotta blow my nose again. I'm so sorry. I will be right back, guys. I'm so sorry. Man. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. I just shut. I'm just a little bit sick, so like when I'm talking, like just there's like a little bit of. I probably shouldn't talk about it. There's a little bit of phlegm in the back of my throat. What about the way we asked ChatGPT to generate the poem? Maybe there's faults there too, so it's not always strictly ML we have trouble with. So to be clear, when I was talking about ChatGPT's output, I wasn't talking specifically about poetry. I was talking about like just basically any prose I've seen from ChatGPT is generally worse than any prose I've seen written by a human author, right? But what I will say is the following. I usually say ChatGPT will get you 70% of the way there with whatever you're doing. But if you want to get to that additional 30%, you're going to have to learn how to do the thing yourself, right? And I think that's generally true for this as well. It's like, I mean, the core problem with ChatGPT is that you're not the one writing it, right? And so if you have a clear direction that you want to take it, it's not particularly useful. You know what I mean? You can teach it to follow these rhythms, or you can teach it to better identify these sounds and rules on pasted text. I think fine-tuning is really powerful. Yeah, again, that could be true. I don't know so much about that process. And to be fair, I am talking a little bit out of my butt here because I don't use ChatGPT enough. In fact, I basically never use it because every single time I've tried, I've spent more time trying to figure out first of all, what the model was trying to output to begin with, and second of all, I spend so much time revising it and trying to fit it into a project that it ends up being that I'm spending like the majority of my time like just revising the output, as opposed to actually using it. And it would have been faster for me just to type something out to begin with, is what I'm trying to say. Now, I will say, poetry takes an incredibly long amount of time to write. It's very difficult to write. And so with that in mind, it's a little annoying that ChatGPT can output poetry so well. I guess I should have known that, I still think that it's maybe, I don't know, I'm curious to see what people have to say, because frankly, I was really hoping that poetry would become more popular because it's like kind of difficult for ChatGPT to generate, but maybe I'm like the opposite is true. Poetry is going to become even less popular than it already is, strictly because ChatGPT is good at this thing. You know what I mean? Yeah, it's a little disheartening to be honest. Just because, again, like I really enjoy poetry. I like prose that has a good rhythm to it. I like reading good novels in verse and stuff like this. And I really. It's just really frustrating if you're trying to, like, Reddit has this thing that's been going on recently where there's this one subreddit. It's like, am I the butt jerk? I will say, I don't want to curse so much on stream, but am I the jerk? You guys know which subreddit I'm talking about. And recently it's been doing this thing where like, there will be this incredibly long story written by this person, and it's like vaguely correct. Like you read it and you're like, what on earth is going on here? And it has like thousands of upvotes and all this kind of stuff. And after the post comes out, the author of the post then changes, like, I don't know, a bit of the post to plug their generative AI model. You know what I mean? I don't know. It's one of those things where I feel like, you've been seeing ChatGPT coming into play and people are using it in order to sell products. And it's just kind of gross and despicable because, I mean, I don't know. I find the whole thing to be gross, but whatever. On the upside, poetry is very hard to grift. Oh, because no one reads it and no one writes poetry. That could also be true, It's just so much harder to write poetry than prose, that it's, I don't know. I would have liked to have seen, I want more poetry is what I want to say. And I wish that, I don't know. I just wish that it was harder to spoof. I don't know what I'm trying to say. Okay, but I do want to take some time here to read into the metrical foot analysis. And to go into that, I want to go over to the paper pile on Discord. So we have a couple things in here. So the first thing is Stack Overflow. Let's go ahead and copy this link. Go over here, paste it there. Okay, so on YouTube, my thumbnail is actually a direct quote from this Stack Overflow post, basically this person is like detecting syllables in a word. Now, detecting syllables is something that has been done, and it's certainly like it's not easy to do, but it's like done for you in LaTeX, like because LaTeX has to figure out like what syllables you're allowed to split a word on when it goes to the next line. You have basically a dictionary of all the syllables of basically every word that you could need, right? So you don't necessarily need to do this for yourself, right? But as I was reading this, there was a quote here. I stumbled across this page looking for the same thing, and I found a few implementations of the lying paper here and there. That is, unless you're the type that enjoys reading a 60-page thesis instead of adapting freely available code for a non-unique problem. And so I just said, hey, that is a perfect thumbnail. Unless you're the type of person that enjoys reading a 60-page thesis instead of adapting freely available code. That was my my thumbnail for YouTube. But there are papers here, and this particular paper is, I think, written in the 1960s. Is very old, this one. In 2004? Man, I was way off. I said 1960s, and it's like 20 years old. It's not even that old. For permission for unlimited distribution. That's different. Let me go ahead and take a look here. So this is in lying thesis. So let's do CD downloads. And let's do Zernal pp lying thesis. I think there's like a high res .pdf. Okay. So this is 1983. I said 1960s. Sorry, I was still off, but not as far off as I thought it was. To be honest, Zernal pp is failing miserably at the high res version here. So let me go into the low res version. This should just be thesis.pdf. Okay, this should work okay. We'll zoom in. So this is word hyphenation by computer. I feel like even that is like a little bit funky, but anyway, word hyphenation by computer. I'm going to read the abstract here, and then we're going to hop into more like relevant research that's happening like today, or at least in the past couple of years, as opposed to like something that happened in the 1980s. So this thesis describes research leading to an improved word hyphenation algorithm for TeX82 typesetting system. Hyphenation is viewed primarily as a data compression problem, where we're given a dictionary of words with allowable division points, and try to devise methods that take advantage of the large amount of redundancy present. The title is great. Yeah, already the title, I'm like, okay. So the new hyphenation algorithm is based on the idea of hyphenating and inhibiting patterns. Let me go ahead and change this to magenta so I can see it a bit better. These are simply strings of letters that, when they match in a word, give us information about hyphenation at some point in the pattern. For example, shun and C are good hyphenation patterns. I don't know why CC. An important feature of this method is that a suitable set of patterns can be extracted automatically from the dictionary. Sure, yeah, I mean, we knew that. Anything that we're going to have to do for the syllable registration, the syllable analysis, is going to have to be automatically from a dictionary, because dictionaries already have the syllabification written out for you. In order to represent the set of patterns in a compact form that is also reasonably efficient for searching, the author has developed a new data structure called a packed tree. This data structure allows for the very fast search times characteristic of indexed trees, but in many cases it entirely eliminates the wasted space for null links usually present in such trees. We demonstrate the versatility and practical advantages of this data structure by using a variant of it as a critical component of the program that generates the pattern for the dictionary. The resulting hyphenation algorithm uses about 4,500 patterns that compile into a packed tree occupying 25 kilobytes of storage. These patterns find 89% of the hyphens in a pocket dictionary word list with essentially no error. Now, but if you say it only finds 89% of the hyphens with no error, what is the 89%? Doesn't that mean there's like an 11% error? By comparison, the uncompressed dictionary occupies over 500 kilobytes. I guess they're saying that in the cases where you can find the correct hyphenation, it does it always correctly, I guess, is what it's saying. Sure. This research was supported in part by the National Science Foundation under the grants IST 82011926 and MSc 8300984, and by the System Developmental Foundation. TeX is a trademark of the American Mathematical Society. I wanted to know who funds this guy. So NSF funded them, and is this a PhD thesis? Or is this a dissertation submitted to the Department of Computer Science and the Committee on Graduate Studies of Stanford University in partial fulfillment for the requirements for the degree of Doctor of Philosophy. So this guy's entire PhD thesis was just based on hyphenating words. That is kind of cool when you think about it. It was a different era, right? Like, I don't think this type of thing would fly in today's, like, PhD society. But I think it's quite cool. I mean, sometimes I just like looking at people's acknowledgments too. Okay, this is beside the point. Let's go ahead and talk about modern research now. So what we've learned from this so far... Oh, Donald Knuth. Okay, well, obviously, if your advisor is Knuth, you're just going to get a PhD on anything. So we already learned a lot from the abstract here. In just that, first of all, there's probably already a hyphenation algorithm that we could use in LaTeX to do exactly what we want to do, because you have to hyphenate on syllables. So probably if we wanted to get to step 2 over, where am I? Over, hello? Here, where we basically just put the notation we want above all the syllables of the word, and we have LaTeX just say what the syllables are. In that case, how do I put this? We could probably just write, our structure like the following. We could say, let me just go over here. So this line would turn into the following. It would turn into this. So once I was out and about at midday, right? Something like this. So instead of having the scansion on top, we just put it on the side. To be honest, I think that's pretty good, right? Yeah, I think that's probably about the best we could do. I mean, doing it automatically would be the absolute best, but to be honest, I don't really trust any algorithm to do this automatically. So I think if there's a way for us to automatically just to use the hyphenation that exists in LaTeX already, this type of writing down the this type of writing down the scansion before actually writing the line, I think is totally fair and totally valid, and I think it'll work just fine. But I do want to see what the state-of-the-art research is, and I want to learn a bit about that as well. So let's go here, back to the paper pile on Discord. And I think it's this paper pile. Here we are. And I want to take a look at this paper here. Go over here, paste it there. And I've already downloaded it, but I just kind of forgot where I downloaded it, or what the title was and all that. So FQAE001. Where's our zonal PP that I just had? I guess I deleted it. Let's go here, CD downloads, and let's do zonal PP, FP, what was it? FQAE001. Okay. So understanding poetry using natural language processing tools, a survey. So this paper was published in 2024. Really, it was this year. Well, then this should be a pretty good paper to go through. It tells us the state of the art. All right. Digital Scholarship in the Humanities, 2004. So this is not a paper that I would typically read. It's kind of out of my wheelhouse. It's not like, it's not like, it is in a sense a computational paper, but it's like quite far from the physics that I'm used to reading, right? But I think it's worth going through and learning about and trying to figure out. Okay. So understanding poetry using natural language processing tools, a survey. What do we have here? I want to make sure this is magenta so I can read it. There we go. Analyzing poetry with automatic tools has a great potential for improving verse-related research. Over the last few decades, this field has expanded notably, and a large number of tools aiming at analyzing various aspects of poetry have been developed. However, the concrete connection between these tools and traditional scholars investigating poetry and metrics is often missing. So they're basically saying, like, the computational people are not talking to the squishy soft scientists, like the social scientist people. The purpose of this article is to bridge this gap by providing a comprehensive survey of the automatic poetry analysis tools available for European languages. The tools are described as classified according to the language for which they are primarily developed. and their functionalities and purpose. Particular attention is given to those who have open source code or provide an online version with the same functionality. Combining more traditional research with these tools has clear advantages. It provides the opportunity to address theoretical questions with the support of large amounts of data. Also, it allows for the development of new and diversified approaches. So, reading this abstract already tells me a couple things. The first thing it says is that for the most part, these computational models are probably not as robust as they would be in other areas. So again, this is already telling me that the analysis of text in prose is probably better than the analysis of text in poetry. But it also tells me that how do I put this? The people who are trying to learn poetry for historical reasons, right? Like they find a poem and they're trying to analyze the meter of said poem from like, I don't know, Chaucer's day, like way back with the Canterbury Tales in 1400s or whatever. These people are maybe desiring tools or could use tools in order to better understand like, ancient languages and stuff like this. So basically there is a desire to figure out like how to read old poetry from not just the computational side. Like this is not a problem that computational people are just like trying to solve for no reason. Like there's a lot of problems like that where like you see the computer scientists are like developing tools, but no one is ever going to use these tools, right? Okay, one other thing I wanted to say is that at least in my perspective, and this might be wrong, I feel like this is going to be overwhelmingly machine learning and like AI focused, which I don't particularly like, but I also understand there isn't really another like alternative when it comes to natural language processing, right? Like it is what it is, So in the field of automatic poetry analysis, the field of automatic poetry analysis is expanding, allowing for the application of automatic tools in verse investigation. This enables new quantitative approaches to address traditional and theoretical questions. Theoretical languages. The advancement of natural language processing and text analysis technologies has significantly contributed to the growth of automatic poetry analysis. Multiple and varied tools have been developed, each addressing different aspects of the verse, a verse with specific goals, such as metrical annotation or the visualization of poetic features. Again, we're specifically interested in metrical annotation, so it's good that they mentioned that here. While most tools focus on analyzing English, an increasing number of programs now target other languages and language varieties. These tools empower scholars to address theoretical questions with the support of large-scale data analysis. However, the development of computational tools often remain disconnected from the theoretical research that could benefit from them. So what theoretical research do you have in poetry analysis? Like, what does that mean? The present article aims to bridge this gap by providing a survey of currently available computational tools for automatic poetry analysis. In this survey, we focus on tools for the analysis of the structural characteristics of poetry of European languages. Since most tools are not publicly available, a comprehensive qualitative comparison was not feasible. That's already good to know, that I probably can't use a lot of these tools. But I do wonder, like, could they not have done some sort of analysis? Like, I don't know, looked at the same line of text or something like that. I feel like they could have done something. But anyway, in addition, such a comparison would require expertise in multiple poetic traditions, which goes beyond the possibilities of a single research group. I don't know if that's exactly true either. Like, just anything. Like, I feel like what they're trying to do is hand wave away the fact that they didn't actually do any, like, comparisons in this work. Of any sort, but it's fine. Like it's a review article. I understand what it's for, Therefore, this article aims to offer an exhaustive overview of available tools for European languages, while empirically testing falls beyond its scope. Sure. The article is structured as follows, blah, blah, blah. So automatic poetry analysis. So I think what we want to do is probably want to read this section here, automatic poetry analysis. Yeah, this is short. Purpose of the tools, again, is probably short. It's probably not, so bad. And then specifically tools for metrical analysis is what we want to read. And then specifically for English. So we got to read through 4.11. And then after that, I think we're good to think about what we want to do from there. Without source, its evaluation is non-deterministic. That's kind of a bad thing about AI evaluation. Yeah, I mean, I agree with that entirely. Yeah, I agree with that entirely. I mean, this is the problem, right? Like, in principle, if you're going to do AI correctly, you have to make sure that the output of the AI is public domain. But like, it's hard to do that if every prompt gives you a different answer. And I don't know, it's a legal mystery right now. And to be honest, seeing who is going into the U.S. presidency, I'm not convinced that the AI problem is going to be like solved in the next 4 years. It's clearly something people care about. It was something that Biden actually did help with. But unfortunately, it looks like the companies are going to win this one, which is really quite annoying, right? Like, as someone who loves to write and loves to read, I can just, and loves to consume art of different types, like animation and stuff like this, and I can see AI being beneficial in certain use cases, right? For like workshopping different ideas and stuff like this, I could definitely see it being useful there. But I also see it as a way for people to like not learn how to actually creatively express themselves with research, to creatively express themselves with writing, with art, because AI will always just do it better. And if you're just learning something, AI will do it better. You know what I'm saying? But as you get better, I've said it time and time again, AI will get you 70% of the way there, but you really do need an expert to finish up that last 30%, right? It's, people are going to think that you can just replace experts with AI. They're going to think that they should be using AI because it's better than they are, because it's hard to explain to a student that they need to learn to get better when you have a tool that will get you most of the way there and get you an A anyway. You know what I mean? Could metrical annotation be done without ML, natural language processing, in theory? Per line, you have a series of options of annotating each word, potentially choosing a best matching annotation satisfying some X criteria across the poem. Actually, this is almost exactly how the syllable analysis works for tech in the thesis that we were just looking at. I scanned through it before stream today. And in principle, you could do the same thing, right? Some heuristic approach like that, I think, would work just fine. I guess it could, and I guess it can, at worst case, be done with an appropriate dictionary. Yeah. So the problem is the following, right? Like, again, I'm just going to go back to the poem that I'm reading right now. So once I was out and about at midday, right? The foot only becomes obvious when you read the rest of the line, right? And this is how it is with most poems as well. Like, because people are so used to writing iambic poetry, there is a particular cadence that you expect when you're reading it, right? And you could fall into it particularly well. Like you just naturally, when you're reading Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven, it's not iambic, it's trochaic. But because of the way the beats flow, it's very easy after reading the first line to continue that pacing throughout the entire piece. And this is why I feel like, in some sense, it's not strictly necessary for me to even annotate this. If I keep the meter as it is right now, and I intend to keep the meter very strictly, dactylic or antidactylic, whatever it is, like with 3 beats per foot. In principle, there is no reason for me to annotate this at all, right? I could just assume that when people are reading it, because it has such a strong meter, they will just naturally fall, like the feet will naturally fall where they're supposed to fall, right? And I think maybe the first attempt, I should do it that way, right? Because it's much easier, and I don't have to think about annotation. But in some sense, I have a choice, right? I either do the really easy thing, which is nothing at all, the kind of easy thing, which is to annotate slightly with some sort of syntax that looks like this, or the research problem, which is actively analyzing metrical feet, annotating them in an automated fashion, which I think would be the first time people do this for dactylic or trisyllabic feet. I think from what I was reading yesterday with this review article, it seemed like people have not really addressed that problem fully. But let's keep reading the paper to make sure I'm not like talking beyond what I understand. Man, I'm having some trouble today. I'm a little bit sick. So, automatic poetry analysis. I think this is where we're at. In the last few decades, the use of automatic tools for analyzing poetry has grown notably. An important factor for contributing to this growth is the development of new technologies and, in particular, advances in the field of natural language processing. Automatic poetry analysis offers clear advantages for literary and linguistic research. Researchers gain access to large amounts of data that would otherwise be unavailable or require the effort of many people for long stretches of time to compile and analyze. I want to learn who's writing this. Who is this? The University of the Netherlands, National Distance Education University, Spain, National Library of Norway. I mean, they do seem like an interdisciplinary group. Yeah, they seem like an interdisciplinary group. The reason I was wondering is it is kind of reading to me like a paper where computer scientists have some sort of like solution to a problem that doesn't exist. This happens all the time where like, people in a particular field are quite happy with what they're doing, right? You see this a lot of times when you talk about like machine learning and its utility in a lot of physical applications. Most theorists don't care about machine learning. Like they just don't. Because machine learning is a big black box, and everything they do avoids big black boxes, right? They're trying to understand the world as analytically as possible, and giving them a black box to do that, even if it is finding more analytical like tools, is not something they want, right? And so you see a lot of times these people who are trying to find machine learning models to solve like the Navier-Stokes equation. It's like, fine, it's great if your machine learning model can simulate this appropriately, but this isn't what people are looking for. That isn't a solution to the Navier-Stokes equation, right? This isn't. When people want X and you give them something that is X, but done with machine learning, people are not happy with that, right? Because you're solving a problem that wasn't naturally there, right? And so there are a lot of places in research where people have like this hammer. Usually it's AI nowadays, but it could be quantum computing, it could be anything, and they want to find something to hammer with it. Everything becomes a nail, right? They're trying to use this everywhere. And it becomes quite frustrating to even read academic literature nowadays. Furthermore, the use of such tools also presents advantages. Presents advantages that vary depending on the type of tool considered. For instance, they can provide a diachronic perspective on formal aspects of poetry or stylistic analysis on often overlooked poetic language markers. These tools can be employed to empirically test claims made in previous traditional studies. Studies by Navarro, Colorado, sure, it doesn't matter who these people are, have tested and corroborated the claims regarding the Spanish Renaissance, hendecasyllable being predominantly a Maori. Now I don't know anything about this. I don't even know what this means, to be honest. But I think we can kind of get the gist of what they're trying to say. What they're trying to say is that when it comes to poetry analysis, because of these tools, we can more or less identify whether previous studies are accurate to some extent. And it also gives us just new tools allow you to do more research faster, all this kind of stuff. This is all just a hard sell for neurolinguistic programming. Natural language processing. Quantum computing tends to create problems that are solved via non-quantum computing at the same complexity. Although, funny, there is some value in that. Yeah, it depends on who you are, right? So moreover, at the epistemological level, there we go, automatic annotations of large corpora can be viewed as performed by a single hand. What does that mean? Which is not possible in classical manual approaches. I see. So they're saying that because it's a single piece of software that is doing all the analysis, it won't have a bias that humans do when you have multiple hands in the same basket. In fact, working with big corpora annotated by a group of people requires precise guidelines in order to avoid inter-annotator disagreements. That's totally fair. I tried to mention this before, but the way in which we annotate meters strongly depends on who's doing the annotation, right? Because people will read the work differently, right? Which is why I think it is so important to have the annotations in the poem. Where am I going? I think this just sold it to me. I need the annotations in there because without annotating the poem, I think some people will read it differently than how it was intended to be read. And it's totally fine if you do want to read it differently. But to provide the reader how it was intended to be read, I think is important. Perhaps don't force yourself into what the AI said about my poet is not a diagnostic tool. Yeah, this is a fair point, right? Nevertheless, discussing ambiguous cases is needed. Given that poetry is usually open to interpretation, the annotation of one annotator might differ from that of another. On the contrary, in automatic annotation, all material is annotated by a single notator, the machine. Once a model has been evaluated, it will always make the same choices and interpretations along with the whole corpus. I don't know if this is actually an advantage, though, because, what this means is, again, let's take Shakespeare, for example. So when Shakespeare wrote his work, it was iambic pentameter, but he has some choices in the way in which he writes the work that are different than how we would naturally read it today. Like, for example, the ed at the end of words, like if he says the word calloused, it would be calloused, right? The ed at the end of the words are more pronounced in order to fit iambic pentameter a little bit better. And if he doesn't want that ed to be pronounced, he has specific notation to, kind of slur the speech back together to how it would be naturally pronounced in today's English, right? So I think it is actually very valuable to have different opinions and to discuss how the meter is supposed to be. But I can also see for the bulk of literature, if you're just trying to get like general trends, having a single annotator going through, discovering what the meter is, this is all very valuable, so that you get a general idea. Like, okay, were these people writing anapestic poetry? Were they writing iambic poetry? What type of metrical feet are they using? To be honest, though, I don't know where that information is actually useful at all. I really don't. But maybe it's useful somewhere. And I guess it's useful for people to understand culturally. I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I know that like it's important to know how a poem was written and how it sounds, so that it can be passed down by oral tradition, which is very important. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff here that I don't really understand where this research is being used. So I don't know if these tools can actually be useful, beyond just like statistical analysis, you know? As most systems are deterministic, this minimizes the risk of having two poems be metrically different because of choices of its automatic annotator. Similarly, automatic tools for poetry visualization enhance close reading, or complement distant reading perspectives, as proposed by Moretti. This type of innovative approach allows for a more detailed and rich investigation of poetry. However, not all tools are easily available to scholars, and only a few have graphical user interfaces. I'm digesting this a bit, right? I'm coming into this with the hope that it is possible to use some sort of metrical foot analyzer in the poetry that I'm writing. Specifically because everything is dactylic, it's so easy. Like, I don't have to think about anything. Like, literally, like, my poem should be the easiest possible poem to annotate. And so I'm not sure if there's actually an active research problem here, but hopefully by the end of the stream, we figure this out. Because if there is an active research problem that I think I could contribute to, you know, I'm the type of guy that I could finish it in a weekend, or I could spend 3 months and finish it, you know, with an equal level of competency, but a paper also comes out of it. Like, I'd like a paper. Like, papers are fun, you know? So the present survey specifically focuses on tools that analyze the structural characteristics of verse rather than its content. For this reason, we decided not to include tools that relate to the meaning of poetic texts. Furthermore, we chose tools for Indo-European languages as our area of focus, including historic languages such as Latin, Ancient Greek, Middle and High German, etc. Therefore, our survey does not contain the description of tools developed for other languages and varieties. Basque, Finnish are the only non-Indo-European language is considered. The reason for this exception is that the tools annotating Basque and Finnish poetry are already included in this study, since they are used to perform annotations of English and Spanish verse and English verse, respectively. Sure, okay, fair enough. Our selection method aimed to be as exhaustive as possible. We started from the most recent Conference on Digital Humanities 2020 and selected all abstracts based on keyword search for poetry-related terms. For example, poetry, poem, verse, meter, okay? From there, we went backwards in time, reading all bibliographies from the relevant papers in an effort to encompass every approach in a timeline. Okay, I mean, this is just, I don't know why they even included this paragraph. That's just a literature review, but fine. As a result of our study, we could infer that not all languages and poetic traditions have received equal attention in the development of automatic tools for poetry analysis. Some languages, such as English, have a large number of existing tools. Other languages are underrepresented, such as Italian, for which only one tool seems to be available. Sure. Last, the time range of our survey expands from the late 1980s to mid-2020s, covering 40 years of advances and evolution of tool creation. As shown in Figure 1, the earliest automatic tools for poetry analysis date back to the end of the last century, especially in the 90s, where many of them have been created in the last decade. Sure. In the next section, we propose a classification of the tools based on their general characteristics, such as the languages they are developed for, their purpose, and the type of technology they employ. Online documentation and code repositories are listed in the appendix. Okay, let's take a look at here. So the paper we were just reading came just before this one, I think. That's the one of the syllable analysis for LaTeX. Metrometer sounds like something we might want to look into. Scandroid, man, what good names. It looks to me like, yeah, the bulk of them came out after, 2010 or so? Then we get an explosion of poetry analysis. And, I found an app on my phone, even for poetry analysis. So, I mean, this shouldn't be difficult to do. Anyway, let's just keep reading and see what they say. The current survey of tools covers 17 languages and language varieties. We focus on Indo-European languages. Didn't they just say this? Okay, that's fine. I'm just going to skip that paragraph. Purpose of the tools. 3 groups can be outlined based on the general purpose for which the tools were developed. 1, tools for for metrical annotation, namely those that annotate poetry in terms of stress, line length, rhyme, and rhythm. Sure. 2, tools for poetry recognition, that is, that to determine whether a given text is poetry or not. This is interesting. I want to learn about this because I don't think there's actually a very clear definition of what poetry is, and I want to know what you do for that classification. And 3, tools for poetry visualization, which aim to enhance close reading by highlighting various details of the line, for example, recurrent sounds on a line. The following sections provide a survey of the tools. It's okay. So tools for metrical annotation. I think I also want to read not just English, so I want to skip past 4.1.1. I also want to read 4.2, which is the discussion of, where are we? That's 5. 4.3.2. Poetry visualization. I don't necessarily need that. Poetry recognition. So this is going to be on page 12, it looks like. All right, so we go through English and then we go back to page 12 for the last bit here. Okay. So let's start by reading tools for poetry for metrical annotation, and then we go into English, and then we go from there. So the first and the largest macro group considered in the present survey consists of tools that focus on metrical annotation. These tools are primarily concerned with defining the metrical features of verse. The specific features considered may vary depending on the poetic tradition being analyzed. For example, word stress and number of syllables per line are essential elements in accentual syllabic verse, English iambic pentameter, and play an important role in syllabotonic tradition, Spanish hendecasyllable. I don't even know what this means, hendecasyllable, as well. On the other hand, for syllabic poetry, which is only defined by the number of syllables per line, e.g. French Alexandrine. So actually, I used to write in syllabic poetry for English, but I switched to metrical feet, right? 11 syllables, thanks. Foot-based poetry, ancient Greek verse, needs to be analyzed with a tool able to identify feet. Other tools annotate meters, which are either quantitative, Latin hexameter, or a hybrid between quantitative and accentual verse. So which one was iambic pentameter? Accentual syllabic verse, right? So I think this is what I'm using then? Question mark? Okay. In those cases, syllable quantity also needs to be considered. In addition, metrical features like stanza division and rhyme scheme can provide valuable insights into the characteristics of poetry. The tools described in this section are designed to detect and annotate these features based on the specific poetic traditions they are developed for. They do so by applying different types of algorithms or different techniques. Nevertheless, they all share a common goal to understand the structure of a verse and annotate it according to its metrical pattern and characteristics. Okay, so here's the hope, the heart, the meat and potatoes of the stream. I'm hoping that in the next few pages, I understand a lot more about the state of the art for these tools, and I understand whether it's even possible to do this type of, like, whether it's even possible to do the type of metrical analysis that I want. Just spreading positivity. I hope your stream goes well. Hey, I'm glad you're here. I hope your life goes well, I guess. Thanks for coming in. So one of the first metrical annotation tools developed is the tool by Logan, 1988. Which utilizes sound pattern detection for metrical annotation. That's interesting. In addition to syllabic and stress assignment, this tool identifies the recurring sounds within lines and their patterns across lines. It also considers the distinctive features of sounds, plus or minus, or plus or coronal. I actually don't know what these, labial and coronal, etc. Both on a per line basis for the entire poem. By comparing the generated metrical annotation with metrical pattern of an iambic pentameter, the tool calculates metrical complexity. Yeah, so this is the question. Is everything just so based on iambic pentameter that we're not going to be able to have anything for like the trisyllabic meter? I don't know. The connectionist model developed by Hayward analyzes poetry in order to measure its metricality, which is a concept that has been claimed to be a gradient. What does that mean in this case? It is still not clear at what degree of deviance from the canon at a line stops being metrical. Yeah, okay, this is a question. So this one is specifically trying to measure how like the type of meter that the verse has, right? Which is important. But I suppose at some point it just breaks down because it doesn't really know. It doesn't really know, like, if it loses track, it doesn't know how to get back on track. Is what I'm trying to say. Now I'm quite curious about this gradient thing from 2012. That might be something to look into, a bit later. Yeah, I don't know what it means by gradient. Does it mean that there's like some sort of derivative of the poetic meter? Like, I don't know, how would you derive a meter? I don't think that's possible. So I don't know what it means by gradient. It's still not clear at what degree of deviance from the canon a line stops being metrical. Where is my pen? There it is. The tool aims to identify the boundary between metricality and unmetricality by using an artificial neural networks with a parallel distributed processing model. Okay. I've lost interest, but I am interested in seeing what the gradient means. This is back in 1988. The annotation considers stress on the intonational, lexical, prosodic, syntactic, and interpretive levels and aims to account for their interaction. The annotations for the different levels are merged into a calculation of the potential activation of metrical stress of each position. This tool is built with a bias towards iambic reading. Therefore, when annotating a line, it always tries to match such a rhythm. Yeah, that's exactly what I was wondering, right? Like, are all of these tools iambic, right? Is that what it is? Every tool is iambic. That's fine if every tool is iambic, but like, that's not what I was hoping for. You know what I mean? Scandroid is a tool for scansion of iambic and anapestic poetry. Anapestic, hey, we're getting there, and has a bias for these meters as a result. Again, it's a question as to what anapestic poetry means. Does this also mean dactylic will like fall into the same fold? Because it's like a dactyl is just an anti-anapest, and an anapest is an anti-dactyl, right? At least the researcher acknowledges their bias. Oh, it's good. I mean, I'm really happy that they're doing this. Like, this is why I'm reading the paper, because I think they're doing a good job of explaining where the state of the art is. And if everything is just, iambic, that is what it is, We have solutions that are just not as elegant, but are probably worth looking into for our particular case. If a poem is written in a different meter, the program forces its lines into one of the two possible scansions. When analyzing a line, it first tries to determine whether it's formed by iambic or anapestic feet, and subsequently calculates line length. Initially, it divides the line into two words, then syllabifies words, and assigns stress to syllables based on the built-in dictionary and on general principles. The tool can be downloaded from its website, which also provides a tutorial, a manual, and source code. To be honest, though, maybe we just do this, it's just, we do the same algorithm. We just do it for dactylic poetry, right? Because again, my particular poem that I'm writing right now for this specific use case is just a continuation of dactylic poetry. So like literally, as long as we can analyze the first dactyl, which we can, all we have to do is just put the dots and dashes where they're supposed to be. And maybe this is fine, right? So Analyze Poems is developed using, the poetry of Representative Poetry Online. Okay, a web anthology of 4,800 poems in English and French. Analyze Poems employs syllable decomposition, stress placement, and rhyme in order to identify the dominant meter and rhyme schemes in a poem. Word stress assignment is checked in a lexicon database, and in the case that a word is not in the database, the user is asked to provide the information needed. Analyze Poems also verifies whether line length is stable in the poem. Even though it's not based on a specific fixed meter, the tool assumes a regular metrical form. So this is another thing we have to keep in mind. If these are tools that we just like put the poem into and then we get back something out, like we need something that we can use, like we need a library, right? Like something, not necessarily a Julia library, a C library, a LaTeX package, something, right? Something that we can we need something that is not graphical. We need something that's just like, not standalone, something that we can use in a programmatic workflow, right? So that's the other thing we have to keep in mind here. Built on Scandroid, Calliope implements metrical scansion by using syntactic information, namely stress assignment derived from syntax and phonological scansion based on syntax. It uses the Antelope Natural Language Processing Parser for parsing the text into syntactic elements. Stress is assigned using lexicon, and phonological grouping is performed. The output is parsed by a phonological scansion algorithm, and subsequently, consistency of the result is assessed. So this is interesting. I want to know what this algorithm is. So I might just look that up. Phonological scansion algorithm, because that I think is what we need. Where am I? I want to go here, and I want to go to Qt browser. Phonological scansion algorithm. Here. Seeking thoughts on Loquax, a tool for Loquai? I don't know. Fast and accurate syllabification. Runtime plan. Fast and accurate syllabification and scansion of Spanish poetry. That's specifically Spanish. I think I'm just going to have to keep reading and hope that they talk more about it later, because it doesn't seem like I'm finding this algorithm. Like, it's not a natural algorithm. It seems like something that it's probably some machine learning thing. Calliope the Muse. Nice name. Yeah, I think it's Calliope, right? Am I mispronouncing it? So the tool has been tested with iambic and trochaic meters and with free verse. The second decade of the 2000s there was a growing interest in automatic metrical annotation tools, leading to a significant increase in the variety of tools for analyzing poetry. These guys developed a tool for metrical annotation, generation, and translation of poetic texts with a focus on English rhythmic poetry. They extract word stress patterns from the corpus sonnets.org, an archive of English sonnets, using unsupervised learning. Sure, I don't mind unsupervised learning. Since a pronunciation dictionary of contemporary English could not handle the language of part of the sonnets in the corpus, i.e. Shakespeare's 1600 English, the model extracts word stresses without relying on pronunciation dictionary. Okay. Poetry generation is based on a finite state cascade composed of three models. A user-supplied model, which generates a single string of metrical strong and weak positions. A model that selects words based on the required stress. And a word trigram model built from a corpus consisting of 10,000 lines of English love poems. I don't know how to post sound reading of an English word, but you're close enough. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm doing the best I can. TS Jost, wonderful episode of Laos Labs Internet People. Another back of welcome. Hello to thee. How are you doing? Finally, another finite state cascade is employed in order to implement translation to the model with the aim of providing coherence of meaning to the generated text. To explain the poetic input from a different language, Italian is, in this case, is used to train statistical phrase-based machine translation. Okay, phrase-based machine translation might be something I want to look into as well, but I feel like this is another ML method. The lattice generated by PBMT is sent to the model trained for poetry annotation. Finally, the resulting syllable sequences are filtered with a single path determinicity, iambic pentameter, etc. Iambic pentameter. Again, we're back to iambic pentameter. It's just I feel like everything is going to be iambic pentameter in English. So prosodic. Again, this is where I feel like I know this one, is a tool that focuses on metrical and phonological parsing of poetry. Its scansion process begins with tokenization of the text into words, which are then converted into stressed syllabified phonetic transcriptions, right? Again, like the weird thing about this whole stressed and unstressed thing is that like there are like every word has like a primary stress and like secondary stresses. And this is where I think maybe it's just best for us to annotate ourselves, right? Just to say, look, I don't want any computer telling me what is and is not stressed here. I'm just going to do it myself. But again, I'm just going to see where these things are and how good they are at this point. So by default, Prosodic uses CMU pronunciation dictionary to retrieve information about stress patterns and syllable boundaries. For the metrical parsing of words not available in the CMU pronunciation dictionary, a text-to-speech engine is used. That's interesting. Each line is assigned its best available metrical parsing based on a set of constraints following the principles of optimality theory, which can be defined by the user. The default metrical constraints are based on those proposed by Hansen and Kiparsky, such as strength. A weak syllable would not be in a strong position, and a strong syllable should not be in a weak position. Stress, and minimal foot. A disyllabic metrical foot. A metrical position should not contain more than a minimal foot. Okay. Constraints can be adjusted to different frameworks or metrical forms. Prosodic is available in a code repository, which also contains 2 English and Finnish corpora. Okay, maybe this is useful, but what is this figure 2? The line analysis can be downloaded as PDF or Excel format. Figure 2 is an example of the annotation of 3 lines by using prosodic. So what does this look like then? This is a prototype application for scansion and enjambment detection for Spanish poetry. This is prosodic up here. From the fairest creatures we desire increase. From the fairest creature we desire increase. From fairest creatures we desire increase. Okay. Meter is WSW. Sure, this is fine. 10 syllables. Fine. This is all fine. Like it's not is what you would expect. It'd be nice if we could just, I don't know how this works and how we could incorporate this into another workflow, but it would be nice if we could figure that out. Okay. So scansion is a rule-based tool that annotates poetry by defining line stress patterns. It also attempts to identify dominant meter of a poem and a metrical feat constituting it. So this is good. It sounds to me this one is the first one that doesn't assume iambic, which is great, or one of the few that doesn't assume iambic. The tool performs tokenization, stress assignment via part of speech. Okay, base rules. Looks up words in a pronunciation lexicon and divides lines into feet. The evaluation of Zeus scansion relies on the gold standard data for better for verse, a corpus of about 100 poems manually annotated in terms of weak and strong positions. The poems of for better or for verse can be downloaded from a code repository. Zeus scansion's source code is publicly available in the code repository where instructions on installation and utilization are provided. Okay. We're getting close to the end here, and it looks to me like, again, the thing that I was fearing is that most of these work are just going to focus on the iambic nature of things. I feel like you have to have a way to verify if an annotation is correct. It should be possible to use ML for some applications there, for training to produce poems of a certain meter, to having it try to give you some optimized annotation for a poem that you can try to verify it to be correct. Yeah, we've got multiple levels of... I don't know how to put it, noise here is what I'm going to say. One could be that the machine learning model is just outputting crap, right? That is to say, the meter that it expects is not the meter that the poem was written for, right? Like it could notice that, like, you know, it could just output the wrong meter. Like that's one level of being incorrect. But another thing is, you know, authors, when they're writing the poems, you know, poets, when they're writing the poems, they have a specific meter in mind. And they're expecting the reader, in a sense, to bend the rules a little bit about reading in order to fit that meter, right? And sometimes those rule bending things are not necessarily caught by machine learning models. You know what I mean? And so even if you do have good metrical analysis, I think at the end of the day, you probably just want the poet to say, this is how it's supposed to be read. I think that's what I'm learning here, or what I'm thinking about as I'm reading this. I feel like it's very difficult for, I don't know, I can't imagine a case where an ML model could know more than the poet, you know? So it seems like you got to run lots of tools in a sequence to analyze it once. Right, this is kind of what I'm reading as well. Built on prosodic, Poesy is a tool that generates a metrical annotation of a poetic text and detects rhyme patterns. This tool, apart from syllabification, also groups syllables into feet. Its metrical parsing and annotation procedures depend on prosodic. The tool is available in a code repository. So, okay, I'm gonna say a couple things here. So remember, the reason that we're reading this paper is because I want to see what the state of the art is, and I want to see historically how it has evolved over time, so that we have an idea of what the state of the art is, again, but also how, in particular, we could contribute to it if we wanted to for this particular project. And how difficult it would be to use these tools in a workflow for my particular poem, right? That's what I'm trying to figure out here. This means that we're already up at 2014, which I realize is 10 years ago. It's still pretty ancient in terms of research. But I'm slowly losing faith that there will be a tool that does exactly what I want it to do and can be used in the workflow I want it to be used in. Which is good to learn from a paper. First of all, really glad that we're reading this and we're learning this together. But it means that we will now have open questions as to where we go from here. And so let's just get through this. Again, we've got a little bit longer, and then we've got one more section we want to read, and then we'll kind of digest what we've learned. So the combination of metrical annotation and text-to-speech, which is, I think, clever technology, has led to the creation of Sparser. Sparser is a rule-based system aiming to represent and analyze poetic devices in Italian and English. However, it is only evaluated though with English corpora. The system utilizes a modified version of Vensis, I don't know what this is, a semantically oriented NLP pipeline for deep text understanding. Okay, guys, if you say deep text, I'm thinking deep state over here. Like this is my problem with deep learning, right? Like deep neural networks, like all this kind of stuff, man. Like you go too far and now I don't know what you're talking about anymore. And this is just my problem when it comes to machine learning. I don't like black boxes, but if you put a black box in a black box, I especially don't like that. Sparser has 3 modules. The first operates at the sentence level and provides syntactic and semantic analysis. The second is a rule-based system that converts each poem into phonetic characters, divides words into stressed and unstressed syllables, and computes rhyming schemes at a line and stanza level. The third module uses these data to generate a parameterized version of the poem, which can be read by a text-to-speech engine. Sparser's output includes a visualization and allows for the comparison of poems from different authors using the Pearson correlation coefficient. What does that mean? What's the Pearson correlation coefficient? What is that? In addition, it includes a technology for TTS reading of poems. The tool can be downloaded from the project's website, which, besides documentation, also provides examples of analyzed poems and of generated graphics. I'm interested to see how the text-to-speech actually does with like metered poetry. Does it read the feet appropriately? I don't know. I feel like it's gonna catch a little bit. You know, it's not gonna be as like poetic as it needs to be. You know. It provides examples of analyzed poems and generated graphics. However, the platform does not appear to be regularly updated. Let's see. InkPen developed a tool for poetic classification partially based on Scandroid. The tool uses prosodic and phonetic features to identify meter and rhyme. Lexical stress detection is based on the Scandroid code. For classification, they use a decision tree algorithm and a bootstrap aggregating machine learning technique. Okay, from 1996. Interesting. So, I mean, it sounds to me like nowadays, like we're not doing new stuff, we're just gluing stuff together, which is fine. That whenever you get to like kind of that boundary of human knowledge, people stop. Like, this is just what happens. Like, you end up gluing things together that people invented a long time ago, and that's okay, right? That's okay. So similarly, these guys use recurrent neural networks with bidirectional long short-term memory cells and conditional random fields to automatically scan poetry in 3 languages, that is English, Spanish, and Basque. The tool tokenizes words using the IXA pipeline, okay? And then tags POS. I don't know what that stands for. Stress. Stress is assigned according to an implementation of Grove's rule. I don't know what Grove's rule is. And uses CMU pronunciation dictionary in combination with NetTalk. I feel like I want to know Grove's rules though. In combination with NetTalk, in the case that a word is not found in dictionaries, its stress pattern is guessed by searching for similar entries in the NetTalk lexicon in the CMU dictionary. Finally, syllables are grouped into feet, like Zeus scansion. This tool is also employed for better or for verse corpus for English training and the corpus of Siglio de Oro. The Pearson correlation coefficient is a measure of linear correlation between 2 variables. Oh, sure. Okay, I think I've heard of this one before then. I thought it was like something else. So, somehow my brain didn't like connect the 2 dots. Let me take a look at Grove's rule. Am I going to find this? Or is this going to be... technology will always... I don't feel like that's what they mean. Technology will always win. You can delay technology by legal interference, but technology will flow around legal barriers. I don't think that's what we are talking about here. 1998. Andrew Grove. Grove has been diagnosed with prostate cancer. What is this? What? Okay. I feel like... Okay. No, there's no mention of his rule. Okay, I need to... There's apparently a lot of Groves. and I'm not entirely sure which one we're talking about. So we're gonna have to come back to that. All right, we're almost done with this section. So these guys from the KAIST research group develop automatic tool for poetry classification. Their models extract syllables by referring to the web Select dataset and scans lines based on the manual annotated training corpus. Aside from special characters and syllables from word boundary is encoded as a character on the syllable. The tool also determines whether a line is metrical or not. The data used for developing this tool. As for the tool, by Tenescu et al. In 2016, the poetry available on Poetry Foundation. Is that a sentence? The data used for developing this tool is, as also for the tool by Tenescu et al. 16, the poetry available on Poetry Foundation. Okay, I guess I understand it. The source code is publicly available in a code repository. Okay, so this is, I think, what we want to read. So although these tools are developed to provide metrical annotation of English poetry, they do present some significant differences. The major distinction is between tools developed based on a particular meter, iambic, and those tools that are not developed for a specific poetic form. Tools developed by these guys have a bias for iambic meter, making their annotation more accurate with iambic poetry than other metrical patterns. The same could count for Green et al., since it was retrained on Shakespeare's sonnets. On the other hand, prosodic has a set of constraints which can be adjusted, and the other tools are not based on the specific meter. It'd be nice if they said which tools they're talking about, because right now it seems like prosodic, and then most of these other ones had iambic by default. Another difference concerns rhyme detection, which I do care about rhyme detection. Only Logan, Analyze Poems, and Tenask provide information about rhyme patterns. Okay, there's one more section I want to read, and then I want to do a little bit of a post-analysis here. Let's go down to page 12. And let me see what we have here. So, tools for poetry recognition. I just want to know what poetry recognition is. Like, what does it mean, poetry recognition? Like, this is the art of figuring out whether this writing is or is not a poem. So I guess it's like if you have prose and you have poetry, you just want to know. Like, I just want to know what the classification is here. So poetry recognition is a recent development in the field of text classification and automatic text recognition with the aid of optical character recognition. The purpose of poetry recognition tools is to detect poetic text and to automatically distinguish it from prose. All tools reviewed in this section are for English poetry. Yep. Okay, so I was going to read this, but actually I don't think it's strictly necessary for our project. And also, like, I kind of can imagine what it's going to be. I don't think it's so difficult to, like, for a human to tell the difference between poetry and prose. Feel like we can do some computer vision nonsense and this will probably, like, fall out. I don't think this is going to be too difficult to do. Let me just go ahead and read the end here. So finally, the most recent tool for poetry identification was developed by Foley. The tool is an automatic learned model for poetry extraction from digitally scanned books. Its purpose is to identify poetry in scanned documents and in particular in scanned pages, which do not necessarily only contain poetry. The model using this guy has been trained on a few thousand labeled pages and detects anomalous formatting in the page, such as differences in punctuation, margins, capitalization. This tool has its code, model, and datasets available and downloadable. Okay, so let's digest some of the stuff that we were talking about here. Let me go back over to ZernalPP, which is somewhere here. Yes, ZernalPP is here. And let's talk. So remember, the goal of reading this paper was to learn how hard it would be to basically have the text have this notation on top of it when I'm writing my poem, right? I want it to be as easy as possible for me as a writer to just provide the reader the intended stresses on a line. That's what I'm trying to do here, right? Now, I know this is a hard problem. I've always known this is a hard problem, and it seems like the state of the art is to use some sort of natural language processing, right? So the easiest thing I could do is just don't do anything, right? And that is to say, I just don't provide stresses on every line. This is how pretty much every single poem that has ever been published in the history of mankind has done it. Basically, nobody shows a scansion, right? Nobody shows how it's supposed to be read, and there's a couple reasons for this. The first reason is that when it comes to poetry, part of the joy is in figuring out how it's supposed to be read, right? There is some pleasure in knowing that there is, you know, you could read this poem differently than how other people might read it, and that's totally valid, right? But I think specifically because the people are not as likely to read metered poetry anymore, I think it would be good for me as someone who wants to write a novel in verse to also provide that scansion to people who want to read the book so that they know how it was intended to be read. I think this will just help everyone out, right? So we have different strategies in which we could do this. The first of which is just to literally type, the dot and the line in with the words. I don't like this one because it's very difficult to edit this. Like if there's a typo or something like that, it becomes very challenging for an editor to review this and to tell me what's wrong. It's possible. It's totally fine. It's just a little bit more annoying to type in. Like I can't just do a spell check of everything anymore, because in running a spell check, this is going to be misspelled, right? So a better way to do that would be to find a way to write the text in such a way that we can just write the words, like hello here, as if they were in a normal poem, and then we do some form of hyphenation, some form of syllable identification, so that we can just type in all of the metrical annotations I want in some pattern at the start, right? So for example, it would look like this. So we have dot 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 dot, right? So once I was out and about at midday, and then I do the same thing down here where it would be something like absolutely normal in every way, right? And so it would look like this at the end, I think, something like that. And then this would be how the text looks. This means that I can use a spell checker and it should be fine. So once I was out and about at midday, absolutely normal in every way, right? There is some bias here. Again, specifically absolutely, I'd have to notate so that it knows that there's an additional, I might have to do this or something, so that it knows that there's an additional syllable there, or I might have to add an extra syllable possible in the syllabary, right? So that there is, basically so that our code would catch it. But I think this is totally possible to code up. I don't think this is particularly difficult. Yeah, so I think this is doable. Now the next step here, where we just type in the text and have some code just automatically put the dots and spaces and dots and lines on top of the poem, this is going to be hard. And after just reading that paper, I now understand kind of exactly how hard this is going to be. The first thing is that though there are tools that can do syllable identification, that we've always known, doing metrical foot annotation specifically for trisyllabic feet is not as well sussed out. I think it's possible with some tools, but it's not exactly clear, right? And for our case, because we're always going to be doing dot 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 dot, we really just have to get appropriate syllable identification. That's what we need, right? So in a sense, we don't really need anything more than that. We could just have an appropriate syllabary, and that's it. That's what we do. We just have the syllabary, and we go from the syllabary in order to determine what, as long as every syllable is identified correctly. You know what I mean? As long as we know where the syllables are in the word, then we can just throw this pattern on and we're done. We don't have to think about it anymore. Plus, I'm not entirely sure if I would I would trust a machine learning model to actually do this correctly. So that's the other thing. Sorry, I've got to, 1 second. I got to blow my nose again. I'll be right back, guys. I'm so sorry. I'm a little bit sick. Give me a second. Okay, the other thing that we talked about today that I learned a lot about was how good machine learning models like ChatGPT and stuff like this are actually at doing poetry. I don't know why. I just assumed that they weren't very good at this because there's a lot of things that ChatGPT can't do, right? And one of them is determining, if you ask ChatGPT, how many words are in the response to this question. Here, I'll write that question down. How many words are in the response to this question, right? The simplest answer we would say is 1, right? That's a very clear answer. Or you could say there are X words, right? And then replace X with 4, right? I don't know. Basically the point is this particular question is one of those that ChatGPT can't really do, and I don't think there's a way to make it solve this question well. You know what I mean? Like just theoretically, it's hard for these LLM models to do correctly. So I just kind of assumed that writing poetry was in a similar boat, where it's like very hard to do these like strong metrical poems, specifically when like for trisyllabic feet, this is not typical for poetry. So I thought it could probably do iambic poetry pretty well, but doing like, I don't know, dactyl or antidactyl poetry, I thought would be it'd be hard. 4.0 gets better with that. Maybe. I don't know so much about 4.0. To be honest, like, I mean, I'm how do I put this? I find it's very weird that I'm even really caring about like ChatGPT and AI and all this kind of stuff at all. Like, it's just one of those things where it's like, I don't know. Usually when I'm writing or I see anything generated by ChatGPT, it's so obviously generated by an LL, like a large language model. I don't even know why I'm discussing this. You know what I mean? Like, it's so obviously crap that it's like I would not read that if I like at all. But on the other hand, I know that ChatGPT and these models are, I mean, they're duping people. People are like, will look at work and it's not obvious to these other people that is written by an AI, right? And so even if I can obviously tell, it doesn't mean that other people can also obviously tell. You know what I mean? And as someone who likes to write and do creative things, it's going to be a very long time before we see an AI that can, probably do like videos appropriately well. I know that there are like AI that are trying to do this right now, but it's so far from the mark. I imagine in the next 5 years, maybe it's good. I don't know. What I'm trying to say is I'm not entirely sure whether it's worth it to like write an entire poem. I want to do it. I want to write an entire novel in verse because it's been like a dream of mine to do it since I was a child. But I'm a bit, concerned that people are just going to see this as another book. They're not going to see how much work that goes into it. And then they're going to think, but I mean, ChatGPT could do this for me. This is the same problem I had with like MATLAB during the PhD. It's like, it's very clear how much effort goes into something like GPU computing or something. And then people are like, but ChatGPT could do this. It's like, well, no, first of all, it can't. And second of all, even if it could, like, that's kind of beside the point. Like, the point is to do like some challenging thing. Anyway, I think this is actually a good place to stop for the day. The reason I wanted to stream this in particular today is because it's a continuation of what we did yesterday, and I actually had to kind of remove the stream from yesterday anyway due to accidentally talking about my kid too much, which I probably should not have done to begin with. And I just thought it was really interesting how like these somewhat simple problems very quickly turn into research problems. And I thought it was nice to highlight it. So that was kind of the main reason I wanted to do that on stream today. Now, I've got a meeting tomorrow afternoon and also Monday afternoon, so I don't think I'm going to be able to stream tomorrow or Monday, but I could come back on Tuesday, and we could continue working on like quantum stuff or whatever other stuff that we want to talk about. So thank you guys so much for coming in. Have a wonderful day, night, afternoon, morning, evening, whatever time it happens to be your time, and I'll see you guys around next time for the next episode of Leos Labs. Again, earliest will be next Tuesday. Sorry, I just got a lot of meetings that I have to do. And if you guys have specific things that you want to talk about, feel free to go to Discord, which should be in the, what's it called? What is the description for the YouTube video? But I'll also give you guys a link here. 1 second. Create invite, copy here and there. All right, here you guys go. So it's go to Discord, put it in the paper pile if there's something specific that you want to talk about. Again, part of the reason I'm back streaming is just because, I don't know, I feel like it's a good idea to have a couple people on Twitch, on YouTube, doing live streams, just reading papers, talking about research, doing things that, are not typically done on these platforms. And again, like I said a few streams ago, yeah, okay, it's a little bit slow paced, right? Like going through a research paper on stream is slow paced, right? Like no one will ever say otherwise. But I think going through research papers to me is quite a lot of fun. And yeah, maybe I didn't do a really good job of like expressing that enjoyment that I was having reading papers like to you guys. But I feel like it's really nice to be able to just talk and go through these things one step at a time. And like, and have intelligent conversations at a slightly higher level. I don't know. I mean, like, I'm just worried that like the educational level of like everyone is going down, especially with the ML models and like policies that are enacted in different countries and all this kind of stuff. And so I feel like having good high level conversations about research and stuff like that is really worth having, right? So that's it for today. I'll see you guys again probably next Tuesday. Yeah, bye guys.